My name is Carolyn. I am 28 years old. I had been with Mason, 26, for 2 years. 3 days before his birthday party, I stood in our living room holding his gift, a carefully wrapped box I'd been hiding in my closet for weeks, waiting for the right moment to give it to him like a normal girlfriend who believed she was still wanted. He looked at the box in my hands and said, "You're not coming to my birthday. My friends think you're awkward and cheap." I stayed there with the gift still in my hands, waiting for the punchline that never came, because his face stayed serious in a way that made my stomach drop. He meant it. I said 2 words, "Got it." For a second, the room felt too quiet, like even the apartment had decided to stop breathing. Mason didn't soften it or backtrack. He didn't laugh like he'd pushed it too far. He just watched me like he was measuring how easy this would be. An hour later, when he left for his haircut appointment, I moved fast. The gift went back to the store. My suitcase came down from the closet, and on the kitchen table, I left a single piece of paper, a receipt, not for the returned gift, for everything else. I met Mason 2 years earlier at a coffee shop near my office. He was finishing his marketing degree, working part-time at a boutique downtown, full of energy and plans for the future. I was a year into my software engineering job at a mid-sized tech company, stable income, quiet life, nothing flashy about any of it. He told me he liked that I was calm, steady, different from the women he usually dated, who were all talk and no follow-through. We moved in together after 10 months. The apartment was mine originally, a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood that I'd been renting for 3 years. Rent was $1,800 a month. I paid $1,200. He paid $600. He said that was fair because I made more than he did. I didn't argue. I wanted him to feel comfortable. I also paid the internet, $80 a month, the electric and gas, another $70 combined, and the parking spot in the building garage, $100 a month, because his car needed covered parking more than mine did. He worked regular retail hours, closing shifts, weekend mornings. I worked remote most days, flexible schedule, home office setup. It made sense at the time. In that way, things always do when you're trying to believe you're building something. His friends were a tight group from college. All men, all in creative fields, all loud and confident in a way I wasn't. Caleb worked in graphic design. Jace did something with influencer marketing. Carter was a photographer. Brent ran a small PR agency. I met them 2 months into dating Mason at a wine bar in the Arts District, one of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs where everything costs twice what it should. They were polite at first, but I could feel the judgment sitting under every smile. I didn't dress the way they expected. I wore a button-down and jeans while they showed up in statement pieces and designer accessories. I didn't talk about the right shows or follow the right influencers. Caleb asked me what I did for fun. I said I liked hiking and reading. He laughed and said, "That's so random." The others smiled like I'd just told a joke. Mason squeezed my hand under the table, but he didn't defend me. He never did. He just changed the subject and ordered another bottle of wine that I ended up paying for. Over time, I saw him less on weekends. He'd go to brunches and birthday dinners and club nights with them. I wasn't invited. He said it was a guy's night, that they needed their space, that I wouldn't enjoy it anyway. I believed him. I didn't want to be the controlling girlfriend, so I stayed home, ordered takeout, worked on side projects, waited for him to come back smelling like cologne and vodka sodas, acting like I should feel lucky he'd even come home. But small things started adding up. He'd mention a woman named Riley who paid for everyone's drinks at some rooftop bar. He'd show me photos from a boat party I didn't know about, and there would be women in the background, women whose names never came up in conversation. When I asked who they were, he'd say they were friends of friends. No big deal. I didn't push. I told myself I was being insecure. Then his birthday came up. He started planning 6 weeks out, treating it like a wedding reception. He rented a rooftop venue downtown, $2,000 for the space. He hired a DJ, another $800. He sent custom invitations to 60 people, printed on thick cardstock with gold foil lettering. He didn't ask me to help plan any of it. He didn't ask for my opinion on the venue or the music or the guest list. When I offered to chip in for the cost, he waved me off and said, "Don't worry about it. My friends are handling it." I asked if he needed help setting up the day of. He said no. I asked if there was a guest list I should know about. He said, "Just show up." So I assumed I was going. I assumed my boyfriend of 2 years would want me at his birthday party. I bought him the gift 2 weeks before the event. It was $140, leather-bound, hand-stitched in Italy, his initials embossed on the cover in gold thread. I knew it was the one he wanted because he'd shown me the website 3 times, hinting heavily each time. I wrapped it carefully in cream-colored paper with a sage green ribbon. I wrote a card, something simple about how much he meant to me. I kept it hidden in my closet behind a stack of sweaters. I planned to give it to him the morning of his birthday before the party started. I thought he'd love it. 3 days before the party, I was working from the couch when he came out of the bedroom. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had a meeting in 20 minutes. He looked tense, arms crossed, jaw tight. I asked if everything was okay. He said, "We need to talk." I closed my laptop and set it aside. He sat across from me on the chair, not next to me on the couch. He didn't look at me directly. He said, "About the party." I waited. He said, "I don't think you should come." The words hung in the air long enough for my heartbeat to start sounding loud. I asked why. He shifted in his seat and said, "My friends think you're awkward and cheap, and honestly, I don't want to deal with it." I felt my face go hot. My throat tightened. I asked what he meant by cheap. He said, "You never want to go out. You don't buy drinks for people. You don't dress up. People notice." I told him I'd offered to help pay for the party. He said, "That's not the same thing. It's about the vibe. You just don't fit with them." I asked if this was really about his friends or about him. He looked me in the eye for the first time and said, "Does it matter?" I looked at him and saw 2 years of rent every month, bills paid without asking, the gift sitting in my closet, and the way he said it like my presence was an inconvenience. I stood up without saying anything. I walked to the bedroom and pulled the gift down from the shelf. I walked back and set it on the coffee table in front of him. He looked at the box, then at me. I said, "Got it." He asked what I meant. I said, "I won't come to your party." He looked relieved. He said, "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." I didn't say anything else. I went back to the bedroom and closed the door. He knocked once, asked if I was mad. I said no through the door. He said he had to leave for his haircut appointment, and we could talk later when he got back. I heard his shoes cross the floor. I heard the front door close. I heard his car start in the garage below. I waited 5 minutes to make sure he was really gone. But the gift sitting on that table was about to become the least of his problems. I grabbed my suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. I started packing clothes first. Everything folded and stacked. Laptop and charger. Toiletries from the bathroom. My books from the shelves. My keyboard and mouse from the desk. I worked fast, methodically. No emotion behind any of it. I took everything that was mine and nothing that wasn't. I left his stuff untouched. His books, his decorations, his candles, and throw pillows, his half of the closet. When the suitcase was full, I zipped it up and carried it to the living room. The journal was still on the coffee table. I picked it up, found the receipt in my email, and drove to the store. The return took 6 minutes. The clerk scanned the item, asked if anything was wrong with it. I said, "No, just didn't need it anymore." She processed the refund without asking more questions. $140 back on my card. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and opened my banking app. I started pulling numbers. Over the past 2 years, I'd paid $1,200 a month in rent for 24 months. That was $28,800. He'd paid $600 a month for the same period. That was $14,400. I'd paid the full internet bill every month, $80 for 24 months, another $1,920. Utilities averaged $70 a month, always in my name, always charged to my account. Another $1,680. Parking for his car, $100 a month for 24 months, another $2,400. Then there were groceries. I scrolled through my bank statements. I covered about 70% of our food costs because he always said he'd Venmo me later and then forgot. Weekly grocery trips averaged $120. Over 2 years, that was $12,480 total, and my share of that was roughly $8,736. I didn't count dinners out. I didn't count the vacation where I paid for the flights. I didn't count coffee runs and Ubers and movie tickets, just the fixed costs. The total I'd paid came to $43,536. He'd contributed $14,400. The difference was $29,136. I took a screenshot of the breakdown I'd written in my notes app. I airdropped it to my laptop. I drove to a FedEx office and printed it. 1 page, clean and simple, black text on white paper, every line item listed with dates and amounts. At the bottom, I added a note. This is what I contributed over 2 years. You called me cheap. I'm done. I drove back to the apartment. He still wasn't home. I placed the printed receipt on the center of the kitchen table where he'd see it the second he walked in. I didn't leave my new address. I didn't leave a forwarding number. I took my keys off the ring, both the apartment key and the mailbox key, and left them on the counter next to the sink. I looked around one last time. 2 years of my life in this space. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out. I pulled the door shut behind me and heard it lock. I drove to a hotel 10 minutes away, one of those extended stay places with kitchenettes. I checked in, paid for 3 nights up front, and sat on the bed. My phone was still on. I kept the ringer on. I waited. The party was supposed to start at 8. It was 6:30 when I checked in. At 7, reality was about to hit him harder than any argument ever could. My phone buzzed at 7. A text from Mason. Where are you? I stared at it. I didn't respond. Another text came through 2 minutes later. Hello. Then another. Are you seriously ignoring me right now? I muted the notifications and ordered room service. A burger and fries. I ate slowly, watched a movie on the TV, went to bed early. I slept better than I had in months. No tossing, no waking up, just solid, dreamless sleep. The next morning I woke up at 8. I checked my phone. 14 missed calls, 29 text messages. Most were from Mason, a few were from his friends. Caleb sent me a message at 11:47 p.m. saying, "You're being really immature." Jace sent one at 12:32 a.m. saying, "Mason is freaking out. Where did you go?" I didn't reply to any of them. I made coffee in the little machine on the counter. I checked my bank account. The $140 from the journal return had posted overnight. I felt nothing looking at it. Mason's messages got more frantic as the day went on. At 9:15 a.m., he sent, "I came home and you're gone. Why is there a receipt on the table?" At 9:48 a.m., "This is insane. You can't just leave like this." At 10:22 a.m., "We need to talk about this like adults." I finally replied at 2 p.m. I said, "There's nothing to talk about. I'm out." He called immediately. I declined. He called again. I declined again. He sent a voice message. I didn't listen to it. I deleted it without playing it. He sent another text at 2:47 p.m. "You're overreacting. I didn't mean it like that." I replied, "You meant it exactly like that." He said, "Okay, fine. I'm sorry. Can we please just talk?" I said, "No." Then he tried the one thing he thought would force me back. "You can't afford to leave. The lease is in your name." That one made me smile. I replied, "I paid the next 2 months already. Rent's covered through the end of September. After that, it's your problem." There was a long pause. Then he sent 3 paragraphs trying to explain how he didn't realize I was serious, how he thought I'd just be upset for a day or two and then come back, how he didn't think I'd actually leave over one comment. I didn't read past the first line. I blocked his number. His friends started reaching out within the hour. Caleb sent me a message on Instagram at 4:32 p.m. "You're really going to throw away 2 years over one comment?" I replied, "He threw it away when he said it." Then I blocked him. Jace sent a DM 10 minutes later. "Mason's a mess. You need to come back and work this out." I said, "I don't need to do anything." I blocked him too. Carter tried a softer approach. "I know Mason can be harsh sometimes, but he loves you. He's just stressed about the party. He didn't mean it." I said, "If he loved me, he wouldn't have said what he said." Carter didn't reply. I blocked him anyway. My own friends started asking questions. My old coworker, Priya, messaged me the next day asking if I was okay. I told her a condensed version. She said, "Let me know if you need help finding a place. My friend's subletting a 1-bedroom in a good area. People who actually cared made it obvious. People who didn't weren't worth my time." But Mason wasn't done trying yet. A week later, Mason tried a different angle. He sent an email because I had blocked him everywhere else. The subject line said, "Please read this." I almost deleted it without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. He wrote that he'd talked to his friends and realized they'd been influencing him too much. He said he didn't actually think I was awkward or cheap. He said he was just repeating what they said because he wanted to fit in with them. He said he missed me. He said he wanted to fix things. He said the apartment felt empty without me. He said he'd been sleeping badly. He said he'd do anything to make it right. He even said he'd stop hanging out with his friends if that's what it took. I read the whole thing twice. Then I replied with one sentence. "You should have thought about that before you said it." I didn't hear from him for 3 days after that. Then another email came through. This one was shorter and less composed. He said the rent was due in 5 days, and he couldn't cover $1,800 on his own. He said the landlord had called. asking where I was and when I'd be signing the new lease. He said he didn't know how to pay the utilities or the internet bill because I'd always handled those and he didn't even know the account numbers. He said his friends weren't helping him the way he thought they would. They'd all promised to chip in for the party, but now they were saying they didn't have the money. He asked if I could at least send him the login information for the bills so he could transfer them to his name. I forwarded the email to our landlord and CC'd Mason. I explained that I'd paid 2 months' rent in advance, August and September, and that I would not be renewing the lease when it expired on October 31st. I requested my name be removed from the lease, effective November 1st. I told him Mason would be responsible for finding a new roommate or covering the full rent himself. I attached a copy of my bank transfer showing the 2 months paid in full. Then I replied directly to Mason. I told him the utilities were in my name and I'd be canceling them at the end of September. He'd need to call the providers and set up his own accounts if he wanted to keep them running. I attached the screenshot of the $29,136 breakdown again, not to be cruel, but to be clear. I signed it with 2 words. Good luck. He replied within minutes, "You're really going to leave me with nothing." I said, "You already had nothing. You just didn't realize I was the one holding it together." He didn't reply to that. The fallout spread quickly through our shared social circle. People started taking sides. Most sided with me once they heard the full story and saw the breakdown. A few stayed neutral, which I respected. A couple defended Mason, saying I should have communicated better, that I should have told him how I felt before just leaving. I didn't argue with them. I just stopped responding. One of his friends, someone I'd only met twice, messaged me saying, "You're a coward for leaving like that. Real partners talk things out." I replied, "Real partners don't humiliate each other 3 days before a birthday party." He blocked me. Fine by me. Mason's party, from what I heard, had been a disaster. A friend of a friend told me he spent most of the night disappearing into the bathroom. His friends tried to cover for him, telling people I'd bailed last minute because of a family emergency. The story fell apart when someone mentioned the comment about me being cheap. Word spread fast. By the end of the night, half the people there knew exactly what he'd said. The photos from the party looked forced. Stiff smiles, overcompensating captions. No one tagged him in anything after that night. Even the stories disappeared within a day. The perfect party he'd planned turned into evidence of everything he'd lost. 2 weeks after I left, Mason tried again, this time through a mutual friend. He asked if we could meet for coffee just to talk things through. I said no. He said Mason wanted closure. I said he had closure the moment he disinvited me from his birthday. The friend pushed a little, saying Mason had cut off the toxic people, that he was in therapy now, that he was working on himself. I said, "That's great for him. It doesn't change anything for me." And for the first time since I'd left, I felt completely sure. The landlord called me directly in mid-September. He sounded tired, the way people do when they already know the answer but have to ask anyway. He said Mason had approached him about taking over the lease on his own. He said Mason's income didn't qualify for the full $1,800 rent. He needed proof of higher earnings, a co-signer, or a roommate. He asked if I would consider staying on as a guarantor. I told him no, not defensively, not angrily, just clearly. I reminded him I had given proper notice and paid through the end of September. He sighed and said he understood. I could hear it in his voice, the moment when he realized this situation wasn't temporary. Mason wasn't panicking because of a misunderstanding. He was panicking because the safety net was gone. A week later, Priya told me she'd run into Carter at a coffee shop near my new place. Carter mentioned Mason was posting in roommate finder groups trying to get someone to move in fast. He was offering a 50-50 split, $900 each, trying to make it sound reasonable. But the neighborhood was expensive, and most people looking for rooms wanted cheaper. He had 3 weeks before October rent was due. 3 weeks to solve a problem he never thought he'd have. The utility situation hit him even harder. On September 28th, I called the internet provider and scheduled the disconnect for September 30th. I did the same with the electric and gas companies. I didn't rush it. I didn't do it early. I followed the timeline I'd already told him. On October 1st, my phone buzzed with an email in all caps. "The internet is off. The power company says there's no account. What did you do?" I replied calmly, "I told you I was canceling the utilities at the end of September. You need to call them and set up your own accounts. It takes about 15 minutes per company." He said he didn't have time. He said he was working double shifts trying to save money. I said that's not my problem anymore. He tried another angle. Can you at least call them and put it back in your name until I find a roommate? I said no. He said I was being cruel. I said I'm being done. There's a difference. That was the last direct message I ever received from him. Around the same time, I ran into Caleb at a grocery store near my new apartment. We were both in the produce section. He saw me, made eye contact for half a second, then looked away and left the aisle. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. His silence said enough. He knew what his comments had contributed to. He knew the dynamic he'd helped create, and he couldn't face me now that it had consequences. I started noticing how quiet Mason's social media had become. No more party photos, no more rooftop shots, no more living my best life captions, just occasional stories of his cat and vague quotes about growth and healing. People sent me screenshots sometimes. I never asked them to. I didn't care enough to look on my own. His friend group didn't survive the fallout either. Alyssa and Jace had a falling out over money tied to the party. Carter distanced himself once the tension got uncomfortable. Brent moved to another city for work and stopped responding in group chats. The tight circle Mason had prioritized over me scattered as soon as things stopped being fun. The irony wasn't lost on me. By October, the weight of it all was sitting squarely on Mason's shoulders. The kind of weight that doesn't care about excuses or intentions. The kind that shows up as numbers on a screen and unanswered messages from people who swore they had your back. He couldn't find a roommate willing to split the rent in that neighborhood. Everyone wanted cheaper. Everyone wanted flexibility. Nobody wanted the problem he was offering. I heard through a neutral mutual that he'd started sleeping on a friend's couch some nights, not because he'd moved out yet, but because the apartment felt too quiet without me there. That detail didn't move me. It just confirmed something I already knew. He didn't miss me. He missed the stability. My life, meanwhile, kept getting simpler. I signed the sublease Priya mentioned. 1 bedroom. Smaller than the old place, but entirely mine. No negotiating, no explaining, no bracing myself before speaking. I set it up exactly how I liked. Clean lines, calm colors, space that felt intentional. Around that time, I met someone new. Not a replacement, not a distraction, just a man named Daniel I met through a friend's hiking group. He worked in healthcare. He listened when people talked. He didn't perform. We started with coffee after a trail hike, then another, then dinner. No pressure, no tests, no commentary about who I should be. The contrast was subtle but sharp. I didn't feel like I was auditioning. I didn't feel like I needed to prove my worth by being quieter or smaller or more agreeable. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. Mason noticed the shift before I ever told him about it. He asked around. People talk. He reached out through a mutual friend again, asking if I was seeing someone. When the answer was yes, his tone changed. He stopped asking for closure and started asking if I hated him. I didn't. Hate requires energy. I had redirected mine. He sent one last message through that same friend saying he finally understood how much he'd taken for granted, that he'd been selfish, that he'd let his friends poison something good, that he would do anything to undo it. Anything except accept that some doors don't reopen. I said no again, calmly, without explanation. That no landed harder than every argument we never had. The last time Mason tried, it wasn't dramatic. No long email, no late-night call, just a message passed through someone else, casual enough to pretend it wasn't desperation. He wanted to know if we could talk sometime, not about getting back together, just to clear the air, just to end things on better terms. I said no. That answer didn't come from anger. It came from clarity. There was nothing left to explain. Everything that needed to be said had already been said in the moment he chose his friend's opinions over my presence, in the way he looked relieved when I accepted being disinvited, in the silence that followed while I packed my life into a suitcase. I learned later that he had to move out of the apartment by the end of October. He couldn't afford it. He couldn't find a roommate willing to pay that much. He ended up splitting a 2-bedroom in a cheaper part of town with someone he barely knew, paying less rent but losing everything he thought made his life impressive. His social media stayed quiet after that. No more curated happiness, just occasional quotes about lessons and growth and knowing your worth. I didn't follow him. I didn't check. I didn't need to. My life had moved on in a way that didn't circle back to him anymore. Daniel and I kept seeing each other, slowly, intentionally. We talked about real things. Boundaries, expectations, what respect actually looks like when it's practiced instead of promised. He never once asked me to change how I spoke or how I showed up. He never made me feel like I needed approval from people who didn't know me. One morning, months later, We were sitting in my apartment drinking coffee. He asked what I'd learned from my last relationship. I told him the truth, that love isn't supposed to make you feel small, that stability isn't something you're entitled to just because someone is kind, that when someone shows you who they are under pressure, you should believe them the first time. The receipt I left on that table was never about money. It was about effort, about presence, about every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace, about every time I paid more, gave more, and asked for less because I thought that was what being supportive meant. Calling me cheap was easy. Recognizing how much I carried was harder. I don't hate Mason. I don't wish him harm. I just don't carry him with me anymore. He became a closed chapter the moment I chose not to argue, not to beg, not to explain myself into exhaustion. Some endings don't come with a final conversation. They come with a decision you don't undo. I chose myself, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like more than enough.